Hi you guys, today's lesson is on adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers. So please make sure that you have this worksheet before you start the video. I'm going to go through quite a few examples from this worksheet, and I want you to follow along, do the examples that I do on your paper, and then as soon as you've done that, I want you to show me that you have the examples done, and then I'm going to have you finish this assignment and then correct it. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and get going. When we add and subtract fractions, we have to have a common denominator. Okay, so just remember, when you add and subtract fractions, you have to have a common denominator. And a common denominator is a number that both denominators can divide into evenly. Okay, now if there is a common denominator, then we just combine the numerators and we leave the denominator the same. So 5/4 minus 3/4. So if we're going to combine these two fractions, we know that 5 minus 3 is 2, and then we keep the denominator the same because it's already the same. We get 2/4, which then needs to simplify. 2 can divide by 2 once. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So the solution would be 1/2. Okay, let's go ahead and look at number 4. So we have 1/3 minus 1/3. So the denominators are already the same, and if you do 1 minus 1, you get 0 thirds. In math, anytime you have 0 on the top of your fraction, if 0 is being divided by another number, the answer to that will always be 0. So 0 divided by 3 is 0. Okay? Now, if this were a situation where the 0 were on the bottom of the fraction, we call that undefined. Okay? So just remember that if the 0 is on the top of the fraction, the answer will be 0. If you have a situation where the 0 is on the bottom of the fraction, your answer will be undefined. Okay, let's go ahead and look at number 5. Now, on number 5, we have 6 minus 1/6. And to make the 6 a fraction, to make any whole number a fraction, we put it over 1. So this is really 6 over 1 minus 1 over 6. And so if we are going to subtract these two fractions, we need to find a common denominator between 1 and 6. So remember, that is a number that both the 1 and the 6 can divide into, and that would be 6. Okay, and common denominator is the same as the least common multiple. So if I were to list the multiples of 1, 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 3 is 3, 1 times 4 is 4, 1 times 5 is 5, 1 times 6 is 6. Okay, so those are the multiples of 6. And then multiples of 1, and then multiples of 6 would be 6, 12, 18, 24. So you can see our least common multiple here is a 6. That is our common denominator, or our lowest common denominator. Okay, now to get from 1 to 6, we had to multiply by 6, which means that we also have to multiply the top by 6. So this becomes 36/6. To get from 6 to 6, we just had to multiply by 1. So when we multiply the top by 1, 1 times 1 is 1. 36/6 minus 1/6 is 35/6. And I would like you to simplify the improper fractions. And if you want to change the 35/6 into a mixed number, you can do that. 35 divided by 6. Let's see, so that goes in 5 times. That would be a 30. You would be left with 5 left over. So that would become 6 and 5/6. Okay? That would be the mixed number for the improper fraction 35/6. Now, all of the ones that I've shown you so far have been positive fractions. The ones that we are going to move to next are going to involve negative fractions. Okay, so let's start with number 9. We have a negative 4/5, subtract 7/8. And remember, when we are doing subtraction, in this class, we are always going to change our subtraction to addition. Okay, so when you're adding or subtracting fractions, we're always going to change the subtraction to addition, and then we're going to add them. So, in order to do that, we do same, change, change. So we keep this first fraction the same, we change the subtraction to addition, and we change this positive to a negative. Okay, so now what we have is negative 4/5 plus negative 7/5. And now let's think about this. If we have a negative, that's going to be like owing. And we have another negative, that's like owing. And if you owe and then you owe more, you're going to end up owing. Okay, so remember, whenever you add two negative numbers together, you're always going to end up with a negative answer. Okay, so figure out the sign of your answer first. Now let's figure out what our answer should be. So to figure out how much we owe, we have to take the 4/5 and we have to add the 7/8. Okay, now in order to add these two fractions, we need to find a common denominator. So multiples of 5 would be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Okay, multiples of, I'm going to just erase that 4 right there. Sorry about that. Multiples of 8 are 8, 16, 24, 32, 40. Okay, our least common multiple is 40. That is our common denominator. So we're going to use 40, and we are going to make equivalent fractions for both of these that now have a denominator of 40. So to get from 5 to 40, we had to multiply by 8. So now we have to multiply the top by 8 as well. 4 times 8 is 32. To get from 8 to 40, we had to multiply by 5. So we have to multiply the top by 5 as well. And so that would give us 35/40. Now that we have a common denominator and we've made equivalent fractions, we add the top two numbers together and we keep the bottom the same. 32 plus 35 is 67/40. Okay, and remember that answer is going to be negative. And I am okay if you guys just want to leave these as a simplified improper fraction. In fact, that's actually how I prefer it. Okay, so I just cleared us off some space. Now we are going to do number 10. Number 10 is another subtraction of integers or rational numbers problem. So we're going to do same, change, change. Okay, so whenever we have a subtraction problem, we are always going to change it to addition. So 1/3 stays the same, the subtraction becomes addition, and the negative number becomes a positive number. So what we really have now is 1/3 plus 5/3. And we're lucky on this one because we already have common denominators. So 1 plus 5 is 6. 3 is our denominator. So 6 divided by 3, that gives us a whole number of 2. Okay, let's go ahead and look at number 12. So on number 12, you have a negative 10/7 plus 1/6. On this one, you can see that we have a negative. Remember, that's like owing. And we have a positive. Remember, that's like having. And before we can figure out what our answer is, whether we're going to owe or have when we combine these, let's find a common denominator for the two. So multiples of 7. So we need to find a common denominator between 7 and 6. The multiples of 7 would be 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, 42, 49, and then let's list the multiples of 6. 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, 42. Okay, we can see that our least common multiple is 42. That is our common denominator. So now we write equivalent fractions that have a denominator of 42. So to get from 7 to 42, we had to multiply by 6. So now we have to take 10, multiply by 6. So that, remember, is a negative 10 times 6, which is 60. Then we have our addition sign. And to get from 6 to 42, we had to multiply by 7. So 1 times 7 is 7. Okay, so now when you look at these, you can see that your owing amount is much bigger than your having amount. So when you combine a negative 6 over 42 plus 7 over 42, you're going to end up owing, right? You're going to end up with a negative answer. And to figure out what that answer is, we now take 60, we subtract 70, which gives us a negative 53 over 42. Okay, let's go ahead and look at number 14. Okay, on number 14, you have a 2 minus 13 over 8. So remember the 2, we're going to put that over a 1 to make that a fraction. And remember, subtraction, we always change to addition. So we keep this the same, we change this, and we change this. Okay. Now we find a common denominator. So the common denominator between 1 and 8 would be 8. That's their least common multiple. To get from 1 to 8, we had to times by 8. So we have to times the 2 by 8. That gives us 16. To get from 8 to 8, we had to times by 1. Negative 13 times 1 is a negative 13. And now we just combine the two top numbers and we keep the bottom the same. So 16 plus negative 13. So if you have 16 and you owe 13, you're going to end up having 3. Okay, so 3/8. Okay, let's go ahead and do number 16 as another example. 16 is a subtraction problem. Okay, so remember with subtraction problems, you keep the first one the same, and then you change the subtraction sign to addition, and then you change the sign of the next number to its opposite sign. So this would be keep this the same, change this, and change this. So now what we really have is negative 4/3 plus 3 over 2. In order to add these two fractions, we need to find a common denominator. The common denominator between 3 and 2 would be 6. We had to times this 3 by 2 to get to 6. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. We had to times this 2 by 3 to get to 6. 3 times 3 is 9. And now we know our denominator is going to be 6, so we just have to figure out what negative 8 plus 9 is. So if you owe 8, but you have 9, when you combine those two, you're going to have 1/6. Okay, so for the next one, I'm going to show you how we add two mixed numbers together. Okay, so let's look at number 18. We can see that both of these are mixed numbers. We can also see that this is a subtraction problem. So let's first change this subtraction problem to addition. So this one stays the same. We change this to addition. We change this to a negative. So this really becomes negative 3 3/5 plus a negative 4 2/5. Okay, before we move any further, what we want to do is we want to change both of these mixed numbers to improper fractions. So 5 times 3 is 15. 15 plus 3 is 18. So this is going to become negative 18 over 5. And for the next one, 5 times 4 is 20. 20 plus 2 is 22 over 5. Okay? And we lucked out here because these two fractions already have a common denominator. So we know our denominator is going to be 5. We know if we owe 18 and we owe another 22, our answer is going to end up being negative. We're going to end up owing. And to figure out how much, we take 18, we add it to 22, and we get 40. And 40 over 5, 40 divided by 5 is really just 8. So if you want to write this as a negative 8, that's awesome. Okay, let's try a couple more together, and then I think you guys will be ready to finish this assignment on your own. 23. 23, we have two mixed numbers. They're both negative, and they do not have a common denominator. Okay? We're adding two negative numbers together, so we know our answer is going to be negative. First step is to change both of these to improper fractions. So 8 times 1 is 8. 8 plus 7 is 15 eighths, negative. Plus 2 times 3 is 6. 6 plus 1 is 7 over 2, negative. I'm going to write these over here. Negative 15 over 8 plus negative 7 over 2. And in order to combine these two fractions, we have to find a common denominator. So when you look at the multiples of 2 and 8, the least common multiple between them is 8. Okay? So our new denominators are going to be 8. This one's already an 8, and the way that we get to 8 is just by multiplying by 1. So negative 15 times 1 is just negative 15. To get from 2 to 8, we have to multiply by 4. Negative 7 times 4 is going to be a negative 28. Okay, and now we just keep the denominator the same, and a negative 15 and a negative 28. So if you owe 15 and you owe 28, when we combine those, we're going to owe, so we know our answer is going to be negative. And to figure out how much, we add the 28 and the 15 together, and we get 43. So negative 43 over 8. And this is an improper fraction that can't simplify. There's no common factors between the 43 and 8. If we wanted to, we could write this as a mixed number. 8 goes into 43 5 times, with 3 left over. So another way to write this would be negative 5 and 3 eighths. Okay, so at this point, I just want to give you some rules to remember when you are adding and subtracting fractions. Okay, so the first rule is there has to be a common denominator. So when you're adding and subtracting fractions, there has to be a common denominator. The second thing that I want you to remember is that if there are mixed numbers, change all mixed numbers to improper fractions. Okay? The next thing that I want you to remember is that the common denominator are really just the least common multiple. The least common multiples between the two numbers. Okay? And then the last thing that I want you to remember as you're going through each of these is that if you have a subtraction, subtraction always gets changed to addition by keeping the first one the same, changing the subtraction sign to addition, and then changing the sign of the number after the subtraction sign to its opposite. Okay, so remember if you have like 5 minus 9, this becomes 5 plus negative 9. Okay, so with that said, it's time for you guys to practice some of these on your own. So I want you to complete this assignment, this fractions assignment. I'm going to have you first show me that you've done the examples that I just went through. So bring back your paper, show me that you followed along, that you have those examples written down, and then I want you to go to the top of the assignment and complete the ones that we didn't do together in this video. When you're done with it, you are going to correct it using the answer key, and then you're going to bring it back to me, show me that you have it done. And remember, at any time, if you're having any questions, you can always ask, okay? I'm just sitting here waiting to help you. So please ask a question if you have one. And with that said, bring your paper back, show me you've got the examples done, and then you can start working on completing this assignment.